In 1942, World War II entered an intense stage. The whole of Europe was struggling and trembling under the iron boots of the Nazi German army. As the strategic center shifted eastward, the Soviet Union and Germany became sworn enemies. The German offensive was swift, like a sharp knife thrust into the Soviet heartland. In September of the same year, the Nazi German army advanced to the banks of the Volga River. The city of Stalingrad, located on the riverbank, was reduced to ruins under German bombardment. The city was the last line of defense for the southern oil industry district and held immense strategic importance. It was also a symbolic city named after the Soviet leader, and capturing it could shatter the will of the Soviet army. The German Führer ordered his troops to seize Stalingrad at all costs, while the Soviet High Command ordered that the city be defended to the last soldier. The Battle of Stalingrad thus became known as the most brutal battle in the history of World War I, with both sides deploying tens of millions of troops and suffering over 2 million casualties. In order to replenish troop numbers, a large number of young people were continuously sent to the battlefield. As the troop transport train doors opened, soldiers were dumbstruck by the hellish scene before them. Smoke filled the air, fire raged, and the entire city had been turned into a scorched wasteland. More than half of the soldiers attempting to cross the river died or were injured before even reaching the shore. The dock was crowded and chaotic, with screams and gunfire blending into a cacophony. Those fortunate enough to survive were immediately thrown into combat, with 2 soldiers sharing a single rifle. When one soldier fell, the one behind would pick up the rifle and continue the fight. As the whistle blew, Soviet soldiers charged towards the German positions. Under the dense firepower of the German army, soldiers fell one after another. The remaining soldiers began to retreat but were shot by their own comrades. According to Soviet High Command Order No. 227, any deserter was to be shot on sight. After the gunfire ceased, corpses littered the ground, a scene reminiscent of hell itself. The air seemed to thicken with the smell of blood as crows began to feast on the carnage. Soviet war correspondent Danilov managed to slip through the defensive line and hide among the dead. As German soldiers were clearing the battlefield, he narrowly avoided being shot.
Soldier Vasily also had a narrow escape and crawled out of the pile of dead bodies. The journalist picked up a gun, wanting to shoot a distant German officer, but doing so would expose his position. If he couldn't hit the target, he would face certain death. Danilov had no confidence in making the shot, his hand trembling with tension. Vasily, however, was known as the wolf hunter, with unparalleled marksmanship skills. He learned to hunt under his grandfather's guidance since childhood, becoming incredibly accurate with a rifle. Taking the rifle from the journalist's hands, he held his breath, focused, and aimed at the enemy. Under the cover of artillery fire, he pulled the trigger, blowing the officer's head apart with a single shot. The nearby soldiers noticed the anomaly just as a bullet pierced their skulls. 2 more soldiers were killed in quick succession, and the remaining soldier tried to flee. Vasily stood up, calmly aimed his gun, and shot the fleeing enemy dead. Every bullet found its mark, each taking an enemy life with unerring accuracy. The journalist was astonished, having never seen such a skilled sniper. He clung tightly to Vasily, and they became brothers in arms, bound by life and death. Upon returning to the Soviet lines, the journalist wrote a report about Vasily's heroics. 2 days later, Khrushchev arrived at the front to take command amidst the crisis. He sternly questioned the officers present, asking how they could boost morale and inspire resistance. The officers' suggestions were cliched, but the journalist boldly replied that they needed to establish a heroic example to ignite the soldiers' belief in victory and hope. And he happened to know a skilled sniper, Vasily. The next day, Vasily's photo and story appeared on the front page of the military newspaper. He was transferred to a sniper unit by the headquarters and given more critical assignments. The Soviet and German armies were entwined, with guerrilla warfare taking place in the streets. Vasily hid in the ruins, still as a rock. Over the next month, he appeared and disappeared like a phantom, killing countless enemies. His fame spread throughout the country, making him a well-known war hero in the Soviet Union. After completing a mission, Vasily was invited to the home of a young boy named Sasha. The orphaned boy and his widowed mother greatly admired Vasily and prayed for him daily. The mother and son hid in the basement, lacking clothing and food, struggling to survive. After a while, Danilov, the journalist, also arrived at Sasha's home, having heard the news.
As the journalist narrated, Vasily wrote letters to his admirers from all over the country. At that moment, Tanya, a girl from the neighboring house, came in. She was very close to Sasha and his mother, treating Sasha like her little brother. Before the war, she studied German at Moscow University, and now she was a female soldier. This beautiful young girl caught the attention of both men, who fell in love with her simultaneously, yet concealed their feelings. Tanya's gaze lingered on Vasily, as if she had seen him somewhere before. It wasn't until Sasha excitedly announced that he was Vasily that Tanya realized and exchanged a smile with him. Vasily's presence terrified the German forces, and soon the High Command took notice. Vasily was the spark that could ignite the Soviet forces, so the Germans had to find a way to eliminate him. Consequently, Colonel Koenig, a renowned German sniper and the head of a sniper school, was dispatched to assassinate Vasily. The next day, the colonel hid among the ruins and sniped 7 Soviet soldiers. The Soviet sniper squad discovered his whereabouts in a department store. Deceptive and cunning, the colonel lured Vasily and his comrades into a ruined building. The old fox was perceptive, calm, and extremely crafty, with miraculous marksmanship. When Vasily realized the trap, they were already in grave danger. German warplanes roared in, launching a new round of bombing. A female soldier trying to escape was shot in the head by the colonel, leaving Vasily to fight alone. He seized an opportunity when the enemy was unprepared and escaped the pursuit. After suffering losses, the headquarters sent new assistants for Vasily. The 3 of them searched for the colonel's traces among the ruins. They crawled through drainage ditches and infiltrated a factory, only to find a sniper on a steel frame that turned out to be a decoy corpse. While crossing the German defense line, the 3 took turns deciding who would jump out first. Due to the Germans' slow reaction, the first one to jump was actually safer. Vasily fired a shot to break the German communication cable and quickly changed position. A German sapper crawled forward with a cable to make repairs. After a gunshot, the assistant easily killed the enemy. However, another assistant was captured by the Germans while going downstairs for food. He would rather die than reveal his comrades' sniping positions. The colonel ordered the soldiers to raise their guns and forced the captive assistant to wear a German uniform and crawl towards the repair point. Meanwhile, the colonel watched the movements in the opposite building through his sniper scope. As soon as the captured assistant showed his face, he was accidentally killed by his own comrades. Based on the sound of the gunshot, the colonel quickly determined Vasily's location. The assistant also tried to deceive the colonel into firing his gun, and the colonel nearly fell for it. However, the assistant lacked a sniper's patience and ultimately missed the opportunity. Then, the colonel noticed a broken wall on the left side of the floor. Relying on his keen intuition, he deduced that it could be Vasily's escape route. He aimed his scope at the exit, waiting for the prey to walk into his line of fire. As expected, Vasily and his assistant were preparing to jump over the broken wall. Although it was Vasily's turn to jump first, the assistant insisted on going ahead. The 2 jumped out one after the other, and as their bodies were still suspended in midair, a piercing gunshot rang out simultaneously. The assistant's head was instantly blown apart, blood splattering everywhere. Without a struggle, he fell stiffly to the ground. Vasily had another close brush with death and narrowly escaped. One moment they were talking and laughing, the next, they were separated by life and death. This was the fate of a sniper, you never know where a bullet might come from. Witnessing his comrade's tragic death, Vasily was deeply affected. For the first time, he truly realized how close he was to death. Even though he was portrayed as a lone hero, he couldn't help but tremble. On the other side, the journalist used his authority to transfer Tanya to the intelligence department. He wanted to keep his loved one away from the front lines and have an opportunity to be closer to her. However, during wartime, personal feelings had to be set aside. A few weeks earlier, Tanya's parents had been captured by the German forces. To save bullets, the Germans tied the captives together, shot one person, and pushed them into the water. The living person couldn't escape and drowned in the river. Now, Tanya's heart was filled with anger, and she longed to return to the front lines to take revenge on the enemy. By nightfall, only Vasily had returned alive. Colonel Koenig was experienced and had precise marksmanship. Vasily felt that he couldn't defeat the colonel. The journalist promised to devise a plan to give Vasily the upper hand and asked him to persuade Tanya to stay in the intelligence department. However, Tanya was determined to join the fight. Soon, the colonel secretly made contact with Sasha. Using food as bait, he learned Vasily's route from Sasha. The next day, the colonel set up an ambush on Vasily's path. He removed the decoy body and hid in that position, trying to deceive Vasily. However, Vasily changed his route this time, crawling through the pipes with his comrades to flank the colonel. When the colonel heard a noise, he shifted his sniping point and aimed at the pipe exit. Moments later, Vasily and his comrade crawled out, sticking close to the ground. As the comrade revealed half of his body, he was shot in the shoulder. Vasily took cover but accidentally lost his rifle. He ordered his comrade to retreat and devised a way to retrieve his weapon. The colonel kept a close eye on his target, ready to shoot if Vasily exposed himself. After several attempts, Vasily finally hooked the rifle bag. The colonel fired to stop Vasily's action. As bombers flew overhead, shattered glass fell to the ground, creating mirrors of varying sizes. The colonel could clearly see Vasily, who seemed like a toothless tiger, resigned to his fate. At that moment, Tanya, preparing to join the battle, saw her injured comrade. When she learned of Vasily's dangerous situation, she resolutely decided to rescue him. Tanya crawled through the pipes and entered the factory, appearing beside Vasily. The colonel noticed her too, and both sides tried to guess their opponent's next move. Vasily asked Tanya to find a shard of glass and hide behind a pillar. He had already determined the colonel's location through the glass reflections. The colonel experienced a moment of hesitation, which was a sniper's biggest taboo. Under Vasily's command, Tanya reflected a beam of light onto the colonel's face. In the few seconds the colonel was blinded, Vasily swiftly picked up his rifle and fired. The colonel was hit in the left hand and quickly fled the battlefield. When Sasha saw the injured colonel, a hint of barely detectable joy crossed his eyes. The colonel questioned him about more information on Vasily. Despite not revealing any flaws, the colonel grew suspicious of him. That night, Soviet soldiers celebrated in their barracks, as they didn't know when they might die on the battlefield. Being alive was a blessing. Vasily and Tanya sat side by side, discussing trivial topics, their hometowns, childhoods, and dreams. Vasily hoped Tanya would survive and contribute to the reconstruction of their country, while Tanya wished for Vasily to live a long life and fulfill his dreams. Their bond deepened, and love stirred their hearts. Late at night, Tanya gently nestled in Vasily's arms. Unable to suppress their desires, their friendship evolved. The war continued, and the colonel remained the most significant threat to the snipers. In fact, Sasha pretended to support the colonel to provide him with false information. The journalist instructed him to inform the colonel that the sniper team would attack the factory, with Vasily among them. However, Vasily felt that he was no match for the colonel. He asked the journalist not to glorify him as a godlike hero, as he couldn't bear the heavy honor and just wanted to be an ordinary soldier. However, the soldiers needed heroes like him to boost morale, so he had no choice. Sasha carefully observed that the colonel's boots were stained with yellow chemical material. There was only a small road behind the factory in the city with yellow soil piles, so Sasha deduced that the colonel must pass through that road during his mission. Under Sasha's guidance, Vasily went to the outskirts of the factory at night. He hid among the dead bodies, disguised as a corpse, and aimed his rifle at the target. After a night of waiting, the colonel finally appeared near the yellow soil pile. However, Vasily was so exhausted that he couldn't keep his eyes open and missed the best opportunity to kill the colonel. The colonel hid in the ruins, observing the surroundings. At this time, the Soviet and German armies were fighting for control of the factory's perimeter. After the battle, a German soldier was scavenging valuables from the corpses. The colonel noticed the reflection of Vasily's scope just as he was about to shoot, but the German soldier blocked his line of sight. The soldier took Vasily for a dead body and took his belongings. After the chaos, the colonel could no longer pinpoint Vasily's exact location. When the soldier handed over Vasily's belongings to the German command, the general believed Vasily had died and ordered the colonel to return to Berlin the next night. However, the colonel was sure that Vasily was still alive, and the battle had not ended. The German army began to employ psychological warfare, announcing that Vasily had been killed. Upon hearing the news, Sasha cried uncontrollably, making the colonel even more convinced that Sasha had been deliberately misleading him. He told Sasha that Vasily was still alive because he hadn't killed him yet. He also revealed a secret, asking Sasha to swear to keep it. He would wait for Vasily's appearance in the water tower next to the train station. The colonel demanded that Sasha swear to stay home and not go out. Although Sasha agreed, the colonel knew he would leak the information. It wasn't until the next day that Vasily returned to the camp. Sasha told him the colonel's secret and crawled out through the pipe exit. But the colonel had been waiting there, dragging Sasha out and heading towards the water tower. Despite Sasha's continuous crying, the colonel showed no mercy. At this moment, Vasily and Tanya were reunited and had endless affectionate words to share. Suddenly, Tanya saw a child's corpse hanging on a distant water pipe. When she realized it was Sasha, she broke down, crying and losing control of her emotions. She grabbed a gun and was about to rush out for revenge. Vasily held her down firmly. He swore to Tanya that he would kill the cold-blooded murderer and hand over his gun as a trophy to her personally. Later, with the help of the journalist, Tanya prepared to send Sasha's mother across the river. However, she was unwilling to leave because she wanted to wait for her son at home. The journalist had no choice but to lie to her, saying that Sasha had defected to the German army and would never return. Although Sasha's mother didn't want her son to be a traitor, she hoped he could survive. On the way to escort her onto the boat, Tanya was hit by a shell. She collapsed on the ground covered in blood and lost consciousness. At Sasha's mother's persistent pleading, the military doctor finally carried Tanya onto the boat. The journalist, thinking Tanya had died, returned to the battlefield disheartened. When he told Vasily the news of Tanya's sacrifice, Vasily closed his eyes, suppressing the grief in his heart. The journalist felt ashamed of his jealousy and thought he owed Tanya an apology. He wanted to atone for his sins before his death and make one last contribution to Vasily. He exposed himself by attempting suicide and was instantly killed by the major's gun. The colonel thought he had successfully sniped Vasily and came out of his hiding place. What he never expected was that Vasily was aiming at him from the side. His body froze in place, and he caught a glimpse of the dark muzzle with the corner of his eye. The outcome of a duel between masters was determined in milliseconds, and he had no chance to counterattack. He knew he had lost, so he lowered his weapon, sighed, turned around to face Vasily, and calmly awaited death. Vasily didn't hesitate to pull the trigger, ending the colonel's life. He then took the colonel's gun and placed it in the journalist's hand. 2 months later, the Battle of Stalingrad ended in victory, and the German army was driven out of the land, leaving nothing but devastation behind. After tireless efforts, Vasily finally found Tanya in a military hospital. Perhaps after experiencing life and death, they would cherish each other even more.